From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The evidence was so clear. The argument that people didn't know, particularly at the highest levels of governments, that as Clinton told the Rwandans, you know, your voices didn't penetrate into my office. That's not true. They knew.
Alison Deforge, one of the world's foremost experts on the genocide in Rwanda. She died along with 49 other people in Flight 3407 that crashed in icy weather near Buffalo, New York. We'll remember her life and work with Kenneth Roth, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. Then he's met with Nelson Mandela, the founding president of Ghana and Kenya, Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta. He had tea with the Indian Prime Minister. He sat with Muammar Gaddafi in his tent in Libya. He's met with the Queen of England and was expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin. Today, a conversation with the Pan-Africanist professor, Ali Masroui. He teaches at Binghamton, New York, and is chancellor of a university in Kenya. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A pair of U.S. missile strikes over the past 3 days have killed 61 people in Pakistan. On Saturday, a remote-controlled U.S. drone bombed 3 compounds in South Waziristan, killing 30. Earlier today, another U.S. drone attack struck the Kuman tribal region, killing 31 people. The U.S. has now struck Pakistan at least 3 times since President Obama took office. The attacks come days after Senator Dianne Feinstein, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, became the first U.S. politician to publicly state the U.S. is using a Pakistani base to carry out the strikes. During a congressional hearing, Feinstein said, quote, "As I understand it, these are flown out of a Pakistani base." Until now, the Pakistani government has attempted to distance itself from the U.S. airstrikes. Meanwhile, the Pakistan and Taliban militants appear close to reaching a ceasefire in the Malakand region of northern Pakistan. Under the deal, the government said it would allow the region to be ruled under Islamic or Sharia law. The deal was announced on the same day Pakistani President Asif Zardari said the Taliban was trying to take over the state of Pakistan. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez won a referendum vote Sunday to remove term limits, paving the way for him to run again in 2013. Electoral authorities said 54% of the voters approved the constitutional amendment to remove term limits for all politicians. Chavez held a victory celebration in Caracas last night.
El pueblo venezolano hoy está irradiando.
The Venezuelan people today radiate their light and democratic revolutionary virtues to the entire world. Let the world see this light and the people of Simón Bolívar.
The British and French governments are being accused of covering up a recent collision between 2 nuclear-armed submarines in the Atlantic Ocean. The accident occurred on February 3rd or 4th, but wasn't publicly known until today. The British sub, the HMS Vanguard, was armed with 16 nuclear ballistic missiles. The French sub was carrying a similar load. It's unknown whether the collision caused a radioactive leak. Kate Hudson of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament said, quote, "This is a nuclear nightmare of the highest order. The collision of 2 submarines, both with nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons on board, could have released vast amounts of radiation and scattered scores of nuclear warheads across the seabed." In economic news, the UN's International Labour Organization is estimating the global economic crisis could result in a staggering 50 million workers to lose their jobs. The UN agency's chief, Juan Samavia, said, quote, "I sense a huge popular frustration brewing." Samavia said the current economic squeeze is provoking tensions, political uncertainties, and even possible security risks. Last week, Dennis Blair, the nation's new director of intelligence, warned the current global economic crisis has become a greater security concern to the United States than terrorism. Workers have staged large protests in countries across the globe. On Friday, as many as 700,000 workers took to the streets of Rome to protest Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi's economic policies. Here in this country, Congress has passed the $787 billion economic stimulus bill. On Saturday, President Obama hailed the bill's passage as a major milestone.
This historic step won't be the end of what we do to turn our economy around. but rather the beginning. The problems that led us into this crisis are deep and widespread, and our response must be equal to the task.
President Obama is expected to sign the bill on Tuesday in a special trip to Denver. While Obama praised Congress for approving the stimulus package, White House officials said Sunday Obama wants to revise the part of the stimulus package dealing with executive compensation. Congress capped executive salaries and bonuses at all institutions receiving federal bailout money, but the White House executive pay to be limited only at banks that received what it has described as an exceptional assistance from the government. In other economic news, President Obama's dropped plans to name a single car czar who would oversee the restructuring of General Motors and Chrysler. Republican lawmakers in Illinois are calling for U.S. Senator Roland Burris to resign after he acknowledged he had conversations with allies of former Governor Rod Blagojevich before Blagojevich named him to fill Barack Obama's Senate seat. In one instance, Burris said Blagojevich's brother had asked him for campaign donations. When questioned under oath last month, Burris failed to tell state lawmakers about these conversations. Some lawmakers are accusing Burris of committing perjury. Blagojevich was impeached or removed from office last month after he was accused of trying to sell Obama's seat. A federal appeals court in Richmond, Virginia, has overturned a decision that restricted the controversial coal mining practice known as mountaintop removal. Friday's decision reverses a 2007 ruling that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had violated the Clean War Act in issuing permits for 4 coal mines. Friday's ruling is seen as a major victory for the coal industry. Environmentalists say Appalachia could now face up to 90 new mountaintop removal coal mining operations, which would destroy huge swaths of the Appalachian Mountains. A coalition of environmental groups, including Earth Justice, Sierra Club, and Coal River Mountain Watch, are now urging President Obama to ban mountaintop coal removal. In news from the Middle East, Israel's reportedly considering releasing imprisoned Palestinian leader Marwan Barghouthi, who has been held since 2002. Israeli officials believe his release would likely bolster President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah faction before any prisoner swap with Hamas. Barghouthi is seen as a possible successor to Abbas to head Fatah. This comes as outgoing Prime Minister Ehud Olmert attempts to negotiate a last-minute deal with Hamas, under which Israel would release 1,000 or more Palestinian prisoners in exchange for captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Olmert said the release of Shalit is the top priority in any deal with Hamas.
This is the priority of Israel. First, Gilad Shalit. Second, the end of smuggling of arms across from the Egyptian border through Philadelphia line into Gaza. And third, complete, total ceasefire and any hostile activity by the Hamas from Gaza.
A senior advisor to Barack Obama said the president will soon issue an executive order lifting an 8-year ban on embryonic stem cell research imposed by President George Bush. Obama advisor David Axelrod discussed the issue during an interview on Fox with Chris Wallace.
When are you going to issue an executive order on stem cell research?
We'll be doing something on that soon, I think.
An executive order lifting the ban on federal funding?
The president is considering that right now.
In 2001, President Bush limited federal funding for stem cell research only to human embryonic stem cell lines that already existed. Scientists believe embryonic stem cell research could eventually produce cures for a variety of diseases, including Parkinson's disease, diabetes, heart disease, and spinal cord injuries. The New York Times reports the U.S. military will begin recruiting immigrants, offering a chance to become citizens in as little as 6 months. The program will focus on immigrants with special skills who are in the United States on temporary visas. This marks the first time since the Vietnam War the armed forces would be open to temporary immigrants. The private military contractor firm Blackwater Worldwide has decided to change its name in an attempt to rebrand the company's image. Blackwater will now operate under the name Z, that's spelled X-E, but pronounced like the letter Z. Blackwater's decision comes less than a month after the Iraqi government announced it'll refuse to renew Blackwater's operating license. In 2007, Blackwater guards killed 17 Iraqi civilians in an unprovoked massacre in Baghdad's Nisour Square. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's arrived in Japan on her first trip abroad as President Barack Obama's chief diplomat. She also plans to stop in Indonesia, South Korea, and China. And a delegation of U.S. civil rights leaders has arrived in India to retrace the steps of Martin Luther King, Jr., who came to India 50 years ago to study Mahatma Gandhi. Members of the delegation include Congressmember John Lewis, Andrew Young, and Martin Luther King III.
As the son of Martin Luther King, Jr. and Coretta Scott King, to have had this wonderful opportunity